The Brooklyn Vegan Show is a podcast about music brought to you by the music blog and online record store Brooklyn Vegan. Make sure to subscribe to hear all of our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with musicians and more, and find us 24/7 at brooklynvegan.com, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hey, welcome to the new episode of the Brooklyn Vegan Show. I'm BV editor Andrew Sacker, and today's episode is an interview with Dexter Holland and Noodles of the Offspring. Between the band turning 40 this year, their breakthrough album Smash turning 30, and their new album Supercharged being out now on Concord Records, we had plenty to talk about, from what they're up to now to going back down memory lane and reliving some of those classic Offspring days. It was a real treat to talk to them. They're a very, very formative band for me. I know that's true for a lot of people. So it was a real blast to pick their brain about some of those burning Offspring questions. Before we get to the interview, just a heads up that listeners of this podcast can get 30% off their first year's membership at DistroKid. If you're unfamiliar, DistroKid is a service for musicians that allows you to easily upload your music to all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, and more. It allows you to do automatic revenue splits so collaborators and co-writers can get paid too, and provides you with an artist page that links to your music on all streaming services, and allows you to add lyrics, credits, liner notes, and more. And again, you can get 30% off your first year's membership by signing up at distrokid.com/VIP/BrooklynVegan. And we've also included that link for you in the description of this episode, so you can click directly from there. And now, here's my interview with the Offspring. Welcome to the Brooklyn Vegan Show.
Thanks. Exciting for us. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. How are you guys today?
Good. Really good. Hanging out in New York. You know, we're from LA, so spending time in New York is always kind of a treat for us.
Oh, well, welcome. I'm in Queens right now.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's not usually this warm this time of year here.
I know. Today was a beautiful day. We've been kind of driving around doing different podcasts and things today. Gosh, the river this morning was just gorgeous. The sun was coming up over it. Just beautiful.
Yeah, it's like, obviously kind of scared about the reasons the weather is always weird, but it's always nice to get a beautiful day like this in late October.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in the world of the Offspring this year. It's the 40th anniversary of the band, the 30th anniversary of Smash. You have a new record out. So kind of reflecting on the new album as well as 40 years of the Offspring, I want to ask, when you first formed the band, like punk itself was still relatively new. But especially by the time you put out your first album, a lot of the early punk and hardcore bands had broken up. It seemed like a very normal thing to kind of form a band young, go hard for a few years, and call it quits. So now 40 years in, still making music, how does your perspective on punk compare to the perspective you had going to shows as teenagers?
Yeah, well, we don't know how much longer this is going to last. This could just end any day.
I mean, yeah, it's shocking to think that we've been doing this that long, right? And at every step, I think we always kind of thought, well, maybe another couple of years. I think that's what you always kind of think. You can't really plan that far into the future, but I know that we really enjoy what we do. We're still having fun. That's why we do it. Making records, of course, is really fun. I love writing songs, recording stuff, but the live show and getting the reaction from the audience is kind of where it really pays off, right?
It's my favorite drug.
Whoa, sure. And he likes alcohol a lot.
And I do like alcohol a lot, but I could give up the alcohol if I could play for audiences. If I could still play for audiences, I could give up the alcohol. I've done it before.
You've done it before? Well,
I have done it before.
Okay. But yeah, as far as punk goes, gosh, I don't know. I mean, we get asked about punk and what our feelings about it and what is punk and all that stuff. And you know how that is. You can go around forever and stuff. And, I think there's a spirit of rebelliousness, I guess, of course, and energy to it.
Well, it does mean something different to everybody. Punk rock is like Buddhahood. It's something you strive to attain, but you may never reach it, right?
That's right. So. But I think that makes Johnny Cash the first punk. It goes all the way back to Johnny Cash. He was anti-authority. did drugs, got in fights. I think
actually a lot of punks. A lot of punks got really into drugs, and then a lot of punks kind of went the other way, straight edge and
Of
stuff
course,
too,
yeah.
right? I do think that punk rock kind of rebelled against, at least the punk rock of the '70s was rebelling against the big excessiveness of everything in excess, that was happening in the late '70s, early '80s, and punk was the antithesis of all that.
for sure, bands like the Ramones really exemplified that, and that's kind of what got me into it. Was that kind of the simplicity, but there was still a real energy to that rawness.
And yet, Dee Dee was a really bad heroin addict.
And then you got the drugs.
Yeah,
God, they had it all.
So how did you kind of first find your way into the punk scene, like in, the early 80s when you were kind of right before the Offspring formed?
Well, really, it was late '70s.
Late 70s.
We first got into it, and it was bands. For me, it was two records. It was Nevermind the Bullocks and a white vinyl EP by a band called the Dickies. And then after that, it was like, well, what else is there? Then you got the Ramones' first record, right? And then we started looking into some of the local bands, Dead Kennedys, TSOL, Adolescence.
Yeah, there were a lot of punk bands in Orange County that were just a couple years older than us. So we liked them, looked up to them, and eventually started going to shows because there were shows happening locally.
So, you talked about like keeping you going today. It's that reaction from the crowd. When it comes to writing songs, like what inspires you as songwriters today? What motivates you to pick up a guitar and say, let's write more Offspring songs?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the goal. I want us to make great songs. I think what we loved about punk when we first started was the energy, the attitude, all that. But there weren't really a lot of good songs in the genre. And that was what I felt like I thought we could bring to it, to maybe try to focus on the songwriting part of it. So I still think about that. And in terms of like topics to write about, I consider us kind of like observers. You just look around and notice what's going on, and there's never a shortage of things to inspire you. Whether it's just world events or social issues, whatever's happening around you, or personal stuff, in your home.
As far as like, keeping the band going for this long, are there other long running bands you've looked to as examples of like a type of longevity that you like to achieve for yourself?
You mean besides the Rolling Stones?
Sure. I mean, or them.
See, I love it. People used to say, "Oh, they're so old, they got to hang it up." I'm rooting for those guys. I want them to keep on going because that means they're extending everyone's lifetime, right? So it's not just AC/DC is a great example, right? Those guys have been going on forever, and I think it's great. And both those bands rock, still rock.
I mean, I thought the Stones' new record was like legitimately good.
Yeah.
Like I say that, legitimately good.
Yeah.
Like, good.
No, but like
I know. No, isn't it so funny that you tend to think of that? You view people in their later career as not having material as good as early on. So,
I mean, it's like so much of it too is, I feel like you think of it as like youth culture, live fast, die young, like that. And especially in punk, like, you think of like Young Till I Die or Youth Crew. And it's like, and then now like we're at a time where there are punk bands that have been around for 40 years or more than that. And I feel like hip hop is similar too. It's like it used to be looked at this way. And now you're like, look at these great rappers who have 4 decades of albums. I feel like it's their, at least for me as a like listener and observer, like my perspective on this stuff changes, like versus, when I was growing up getting to these bands, I'm like, yeah, like first album rules, everything else sucks, like, and now I'm like, wait, no, it's cool. Like I'm going to see like this band for the, 20th time, and I've seen them my whole life, and they're still awesome.
Yeah, isn't it funny that thing? I think what you made a good point. Peculiar to rock and roll is that they're supposed to be young, but I think the reason for that is that rock and roll didn't really exist until the 1950s. In the 1950s, you had old blues guys all the time. There was nothing weird about an old blues guy or old classical people or violin and guys. But in rock and roll, it always seemed strange, and it just took time for this genre to exist, I guess, long enough for the Rolling Stones to be around for 60 years.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when a lot of bands write records early in their career, you're, trying to prove yourself, maybe get out there. And then, for you guys, like I would imagine when it comes to writing a record like Ixnay on the Hombre or something, you're like maybe looking at sustaining some level of success. Now with the new record, what would you say were your goals here? How does it differ for you to make a record today versus something you made like when you were starting out, or in the late 90s, early 2000s, when you were kind of like in the forefront of,
Well, I mean, all the way up till Smash, we just really played, went in and tried to make records that we liked and that we hoped other people, in the punk rock scene would like. Then Smash came out, and that changed everything. And then I know, like with Ixnay, we did have to kind of prove that we deserved the spot that we got with Smash, but also kind of had to prove that we were also still a punk band. And then after that, it just kind of got a little bit easier. Let's just do good songs, man. Let's just focus on that. I think every time we go in, the focus mainly is like, is this a good song? Should we, and we really kind of go by song until we have almost a record's worth, and then we start figuring out what all should go on the record.
Yeah. Well, like you said, that we're still a punk band. I really kind of struggle with that. I don't know that we're really a punk band anyway. I don't want to be.
No, but at Ixnay we were talking about that.
I want to just be considered an Offspring, whatever, right? Like, I don't consider the Rolling Stones a blues band.
But you don't deny our punk roots either.
For sure. No, not at all. Yeah. But I don't know. I think as the longer you go on as a band, it starts to feel limiting in a way. To go, oh, they're
for sure
a punk band.
Well, I think, go back to Ignition, our second record. Is Dirty Magic a punk song?
Right. No, not at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we've always had that.
I think there's
a side to us. Yeah. But, the other thing that I want to say is, like, those records, like you said, there was a reason why we made Ixnay. We certainly don't need to make a record now. We're doing a record because we want to do a record. But when we get in there, like, we're all in 100%. Like, I want to make songs that are the best songs we've ever done. And we really are swinging the bat for the fences every time we go in to make a record.
I find it really interesting that you said, I don't necessarily want to be a punk band. I want to be the Offspring. And obviously I kind of kicked this off asking you questions about punk, which maybe you're tired of answering. But I think, from my perspective, one thing that is interesting is, like, because you guys became such like an institution, like, you introduce a lot of people to the music. Like, I mean, a band like the Offspring or Green Day or Blink-182, like that sort of like transcending it kind of showed, like, I was a young suburban kid hearing Smash, and I was like, this is like what I've been looking for. So I guess kind of like, because things like that happen, I'm sure I saw that you guys just played with Ed Sheeran, and he was like, I had, like Conspiracy of One as an 8-year-old or something, like, and I'm like, oh, I relate to what Ed Sheeran is saying here, which is weird to say. But I guess, like, so when to hear you say that, what's interesting to me is I'm kind of wondering, do you feel any level of responsibility? Like, do you feel like, okay, like, we have this platform and this power and this music's important to us, and this is, it's counterculture. It's not as easy to find now as it was in the late 90s and early 2000s either. Do you feel any level of, like, punk is important and we want to make sure that we can sort of, carry the torch and help young generations find it?
Well, I think our primary responsibility as musicians is just to make music that we think is good. And then hopefully fans like it. But that being said, we know that there's some music we do that takes inspiration from TSOL. All the bands that came before us, the Ramones, Dead Kennedys. So we did. Once we started having success, we felt responsibility to pay that back a little bit. To go, hey, look, this is who inspired us. These are the giants whose shoulders we're standing on. That
go check them out.
So yeah. So we did feel, I don't know, a responsibility necessary to do that, but we just felt it was the right thing to do.
We're stoked to do it.
Yeah, and that too. We never felt the Ramones got the deserve, the acclaim they deserved until after they were almost all dead.
Mm.
And I think that's true for so many bands in this world. Like, I mean, a couple years ago, I saw the Misfits headline Madison Square Garden. Like, they didn't do that when they were first around,
Right. Yeah, it's a forum. Yeah.
You did. Yeah, it took all that time. That's really cool.
And yeah, I mean, I've always loved, like, I'm the type of person, I love the old sort of adage of, like, if you love a band and you want to make music like them, figure out who they liked. So I think that's so cool when bands are out there being like, hey, like, we liked TSOL, which maybe you haven't heard of if you're 15 and you're listening to Smash, like, so.
Yeah.
Right. The other flip side of that is, and Well, tell them the story about the kids and we had a friend, Ron, who worked at a record store.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. This guy, he's in a band, friend of ours, and worked at a record store. This is like back in 1994. A kid comes in and says he wants to buy the Offspring. And he said, this kid looks like kind of like a normal whatever kid. And he takes our record and goes away, and he sees a kid a few months later. He looks a little more skatered out, and he says he wants No Effects. So somehow he found No Effects, right? And then he said that same kid comes back 3 months later, super punked out, says he wants Crass and he hates the Offspring, right? And I think that's actually, I kind of got a kick of that story. I'm like, that's
and
cool,
he said it was more than one kid. Like he would see, it was a phenomenon.
If we were the gateway to that, then I think that's cool, right? And you're talking about the Misfits finally playing Madison Square Garden all these years later. That reminded me of another story I want to say where I was driving recently where I live in Huntington Beach. And there's a kid who's like 14 years old, and he's got a Black Flag shirt on. I'm like, okay, sure, you see that. And then I start thinking about it. I go, when does that ever happen where a teenager's wearing something from 40 years ago, right? Like, can you imagine us in the 80s if we were wearing like a fucking Bing Crosby shirt, right? That's the same time difference, though. The 40s to the 80s, the 80s to now. It's really incredible. It really speaks to the staying power of those bands, of those classic bands, which is really cool.
For sure. This topic is something I think about way more than is probably healthy. Like, I feel like my go-to example is like Stairway to Heaven was 20 when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, and Teen Spirit's now like 33. I'm like, how is that real? But,
Whoa, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. How crazy. Only 20 years in between those two, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeez. Amazing.
So being that it is also the 30th anniversary of Smash, I want to ask a couple Smash questions. Something that's always fascinated me about this record is, from what I understand, it wasn't made with a particularly big budget. I mean, you made it with Tom Wilson, who you'd been working with. It's not like you brought in some magic big producer. And then, it became what it became. Not just for you, but for like punk in general. I mean, it was a breakthrough record for the genre. When you made that album, did you have any sense it could have the impact that it ended up having? And what would you say that you did differently that did make it connect with so many more people than like Ignition did?
Well, we certainly had no idea it was going to be big.
No way.
People were starting to talk about us on Ignition. So like, we kind of thought, I don't know, maybe we could start to play bigger clubs. So that was kind of the hope, not even the expectation.
It was the hope, yeah. Because it wasn't the reality.
It
was our hope. But yeah, we had to go in and do all the recording on the cheap. A lot of times we would call in and go, "Hey, do you have an opening today that we can get for half price?" And so we pay half price for the recording studio. We had to have everything ready to go in case we could go up that evening and do it. Record. That's how we did it. Our Tom Wilson was living in his RV on the streets of Hollywood, right?
Help us finish it.
So, yeah.
I mean, one thing we did is we actually pooled all our whatever band money we got from shows, and we had upgraded our equipment. So we had what I guess you could call professional equipment for the first time.
Well, one good guitar amp.
It was one amp. We were sharing one amp on the recording. But maybe the other thing is that because we had worked with Tom before, we talked a lot about what made songs work. He hated the noise that he considered, because he said how he was associated with these classic punk records like the Adolescents and TSOL and all that stuff. And he goes, I hate the noise. And we really talked about sonically how to give things space by breaking things up or letting the guitars drop out, that sort of thing. So we had these kind of new ideas we were working on to take the genre that we loved and make it feel more, I guess, more listenable was kind of the idea.
I'm sure you've familiar with this, or maybe just remember it happening in real life, but there's that really famous quote from Brett Gurewitz where he heard the record and said to his wife, "We're going to be rich." Do you remember that sentiment, like maybe going around at all, like behind the scenes before the record came out?
I not until things started going. We had no idea. Really, it wasn't until K-Rock played Come Out and Play that we thought there would be anything to this.
Yeah.
And, we thought it might do well for a punk rock record, but we didn't think we were going to reach Bad Religion levels.
We played a show right before Smash came out. It was at the Shrine, and I think Cadillac Tramps were headlining. We're like third down on the bill, and Brett Gerwitz came to the show and he said, "Dude, I heard the song on K Rock on the way in my car on the way to the show." So that was like the first time I got on the radio. And remember this other girl coming up to it and said, "Heard it," and she said, "I like your new record." She goes, "Very poppy," and I was like, "What?" I thought that was like a big insult.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess there were things kind of brewing, sort of.
So also the year it came out, 1994, is of course such a turning point for punk. I mean, it's also the year of Green Day's Dookie, Bad Religion and Rancid had big records around that time. And I feel like if 91 is the year grunge blew up, 94 was like the year punk did in a way, at least since the Ramones. Having already, been around, I mean, you guys have been playing for a decade at that point. How did the punk scene differ from like the late 80s, early 90s on like your first two records to this scene after like albums like Dookie and Smash were out?
Yeah, I think there was, I guess punk rock was growing and really it was Epitaph and other punk labels putting punk's music on skate videos, snowboard videos, surfing videos. Really, Taylor Steele and the Momentum videos did a lot for the punks. Because skaters and snowboarders and surfers are essentially jocks.
Okay,
but they don't like being called that. Okay. So all of a sudden, there was a different group of people coming in. It wasn't just mohawks, and skinheads, and all the weird haircuts. It was people in flannels and beanies and and backward baseball caps and shit. That was the biggest change I think throughout that time, and it did
up until 94.
Yeah, up until 94, and then it was just everybody. Yeah.
You also on that record, you have the one ska song, which I feel like was kind of a thing for punk bands at that time. What drew you guys to ska and made you be like, let's put a ska song on Smash?
I mean, I love ska ever since I was a kid, and I love the specials, and all that kind of stuff. So, and somehow that music just went. The genres went together. I don't know. Kids that like ska were the same kids that like punk, and vice versa, and stuff. And I think all those people kind of got along. But really, I think I'd have to point to Operation Ivy, right? They're kind of the first band that really kind of combined punk and ska, and then it just kind of seemed natural for a band, even a punk band, to do a song that was a ska song. So I think it was probably inspired by them, by Operation Ivy.
Awesome. So Smash was basically doing major label numbers on Epitaph, and then you did sign to a major. Can you reflect on that decision? And also, like, coming from punk, did you have any hesitation about going to a major?
Yeah, there was some hesitation. We really wanted to stay and work things out with Brett. We felt we needed to renegotiate with Brett, and that just didn't go well. I think Brett's talked a little bit about where he was at. He wasn't in a good place. We just felt like he wasn't treating us fairly. We had done a lot for the label. We'd done a lot of the label's job in promoting Smash to make it what it was. But we wanted to stay. We wanted to work it out. We liked being the Davids that were taking on the Goliaths of the world. We loved, the bands that we were label mates with, Pennywise, NoFX, Rancid. That hasn't changed, but there was tension at the time that was unfortunate. Ultimately, I think it was, what we needed to do, but it was like a divorce at the time. It sucked. It was painful.
Speaking of record labels, Dexter, one thing I've always kind of been curious about, you started Nitro Records around that time, and one of the bands you signed early on was AFI, who at that point were a very different band than the one that later blew up. I'm curious, what did you see in them at that time, and did you have any idea of how far they were capable of going when you first heard them?
Yeah, I thought they were going to do good things for sure. They had songs. They had good songs right off the bat, right? And they're also really eager to try to be a great band, and they're willing to do the work and go on tour and all that stuff. So it was a no-brainer for me to sign them. But what I'm really proud about that is that it took them on Nitro. They were with me for 5 albums, and I'm really proud that they had a place where they could grow and figure out who they were, what their musical identity was, and that they had the support of a label that didn't need the return right away. You didn't sell enough on this one record where you're dropped, right? We gave them time to become who they were, and it was like the best example of all the bands that I signed.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to like just look at their progression from like Very Proud of You to Art of Drowning, and that those were all Nitro records. Like it's by the end, it was like almost a different band,
Yeah.
on top of literally being a lot of different people. But yeah,
There's a couple records they delivered to me, Art of Drowning being one of them, where I thought, man, I don't know if their audience is this might be too much of a change for their audience. But every time they did something and changed, from the hardcore to whatever to like the Art of Drowning, they just seemed to get bigger. It was really cool to see.
yeah. So as I touched on before, you guys have done some interesting collaborations this year. You played with Ed Sheeran, and Dexter, you sung with the Beach Boys. So could you kind of reflect on those for a bit? Like, what was how did those two performances come about, and what was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, I think we, like you said, we wouldn't have done this a few years ago. I just don't think we would have been comfortable going on stage with other people, and we just decided this year, like, fuck it.
And not because we didn't like those artists, but we just didn't think they would be comfortable. Like we never feel like we're a real band. we still kind of feel like we're still learning our chops. We still got work to do. We always kind of feel like that. But I think we're more confident than ever. And so we did reach out more to some of these bands. We reached out to Ed Sheeran and Brian May. We got to play with both of them.
Ed was your idea because you heard that he was a fan.
Ed was my idea. I saw that we were playing with him, and I'm like, oh, we should hit him up. I like Ed. I like a lot of his, especially the more singer-songwriter stuff, more than the poppy stuff. But the poppy stuff's great too. And then who else did we were? The Beach Boys was really some of our social media people work with their social media people who are now, who have done the same bands. But we also have a connection with John Stamos. He was in one of our videos.
But it's almost like the social media people are the ones creating these connections now,
right?
More and more.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like, right? Like, hey, you're going to be playing this festival with the Beach Boys, for example. What do you think? You want to do something with them? And we're trying it, and it's been
we do have a relationship. We sampled Mike Love's voice from a live Beach Boys performance and put it at the beginning of one of our records, and so we do, and they were super cool. Like, didn't you talk to Mike on the phone about it? And
yeah, he was great.
It was super cool.
What does like a young childhood Dexter Holland think of if you were to tell him like you're singing with the Beach Boys in 50 years?
I know he would have never ever believed it, right? I know they were like saying, it was one of the wives because we did a little rehearsal before the show. She said, "So how did you get to, get into the Beach Boys? What was your experience?" And I said, "Well, it's not even that. They've just always been there."
Yeah, totally.
I grew up from the time I can remember ever listening to music. They were on the radio in the car or something. They're just a part of us.
My dad was a big fan of all the harmonies and everything they did. My dad's sucker for harmonies, so
yeah,
he probably hit me to them.
That's is probably the best part of this whole thing is that you end up getting into a band because you love the music so much and you have these idols and they've inspired you and stuff. And then when you start actually meeting some of them, it's like, wow, really blows your mind. It's just it's so cool.
And on the other hand of that, the other side of that coin, like, I mean, what's your reaction to meet like a superstar like Ed Sheeran and have him be like, I listened to you as a kid?
Yeah, it's hard to take that in, in a lot of ways it's really humbling, but it's also hard to just take that in. It's hard to absorb that kind of intel.
Because it's been both ways. When we play with Brian May or the Beach Boys, it's like, oh my God, we're not worthy of that whole thing. But then to see it on the other hand, where Ed says, I was really inspired as a kid by you guys, that is a whole different kind of experience, right? Whether it's him or Youngblood or whatever.
But Bruce Johnson was there with the Beach Boys, and he walked up to a group of us, the rest of the band. Dex was rehearsing, and he walks up and goes, "You know what an 82-year-old man does on his free time?" And I went, "Hookers and cocaine?" He just ignored me. He goes, "I just produced The Weeknd." He's working with The Weeknd and stuff. Really? Like, I had no idea. I obviously was joking. I thought he'd been around, and he did not like that answer, I don't think at all. But he didn't give me shit about it, but he just moved on.
Way to go, Noodles.
So I know I'm almost fucking our relationship with the Beach Boys. You can't take me anywhere, man.
Can't take you anywhere.
Oh, man.
That's really funny. So before we go, what's something you've been listening to lately that if somebody was, you're in a conversation with a friend, hey, what record should I check out? What would be your answer at the moment?
Amyl and the Sniffers. I haven't actually heard the whole new record yet. I heard a little bit of the first single, but I love their last record, so I'm looking forward to hearing their new stuff.
So a friend of mine sent me a video for a band called Electric Callboy that I checked out, and I think they're super rad. And so I've been listening to them. We did a festival together, so we got to see them play too. So that's my new favorite.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. If you have anything else to add, feel free. And if not, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Did we talk about the new record coming out?
Oh, we got a new record coming out. Charged. It's out. Yeah. We're so used to saying it'll be out October 11th, but that was 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
But we're stoked to have the record out, and we got a really full year planned next year. We're going to try to do like 100 shows, and we're really proud of the record. Can't wait to get out there and play it for people. Awesome.
Well, I can't wait to hopefully see it. I think the last time I saw you might have been that last 2019 Warped Tour thing, in Atlantic City. But that was a blast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Well, please do.
Very cool.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Good talking with you, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thanks again to Dexter and Noodles. Go check out their new record, Supercharged, out now on Concord Records. Catch them on tour when they come near you. And hey, if you like what you heard, tell your friends about us. Give us a good rating, subscribe. All that little stuff goes a long way. And we always really, really appreciate it. And thanks again. See you next time.